So last time we talked about the heart and soul and how it's guided by fate to its proper place. This time we're going to be talking about what I believe this function may have for the story of Kingdom Hearts 4 itself. Now, Tetsuya Nomura has already said that the Master of Masters and the Foretellers will not play a huge significant role within this story. In other words, even though we see the Master of Masters and obviously Luxu in Unreality, watching Sora as he takes on the dark side, which we'll talk about how a dark side could possibly get to Unreality. I'll hint at that it has something to do with how I believe Bahamut was hinted at already in The Gathering. But what we have here to talk about is actually going to be very interesting because how I believe this actually will meld into the story of Kingdom Hearts 4 to cause the events, the scenes, the scenarios within Kingdom Hearts 4 is because it harkens back to the fight with Yozora, what Strelitzia tells Sora, and what may actually be happening with Sora himself, and why, as confirmed by Tetsuya Nomura, in order for him to get back home and to his friends, that will require his resurrection. In other words, he will have to be revived from death. So let's talk about this. So you all know the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer quote by now. Just to keep it short, the heart resides within the soul. What that tells us is that Sora right now is traveling around in his soul form. This can be intrinsically verified by the story itself because Sora appears within the final world of nighttime after he disappears from being with Kairi. We can only assume, though, that this is exactly the moment right after that he appears within the final world of nighttime and he meets Yozora. Upon meeting Yozora, he speaks to Yozora, and Yozora tells him that he is not in the real world and that he himself is real. That's not exactly what he says, but that's the logical interpretation I get from what he actually tells Sora. Now, when we see the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer, we are met or visited by Strelitzia. Sora himself is visited by Strelitzia. And when they meet, she tells him, you can think of this world as like an afterlife. Or for us, this world is like an afterlife. So what is the context that can be brought about from what she says? That Sora and herself are dead. There's 100% confirmation that Strelitzia is at the very least on the verge of death, because we know what happened to her within Kingdom Hearts Key does technically count as death. So with her and Sora potentially being in the same place, being in the same position, if you remember, I said in the last video, I said that Strelitzia and Sora may be invisible to the inhabitants of the worlds within Unreality. And this is where we harken back to the fight with Yozora. Because if you remember at the ending, you definitely remember, in the bad ending, Sora is crystallized. In the good ending, Sora returns to the final world of daytime. And one can assume that this is when he says the opening quote that they can take your world, they can take your heart, and blah, 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 blah. Because Tetsuya Nomura said that does have canon relevance to the story. It's supposed to be happening at the ending. However, it didn't make sense during the original release. But with Remind, it does make sense because Sora does wind up in the final world by the ending. However, I'm of the belief, due to the novelization saying that Sora lost that fight, that the good and the bad ending are actually in tandem, and the novel itself wasn't capable of giving us the true way that the ending occurs because they didn't want to spoil how the ending actually plays out. So I believe that the way they work in tandem is that Sora actually does win. He is told by Yozora that his powers aren't needed yet, but after Yozora leaves and Sora goes to the final world of daytime, or the final world is reverted back to its daytime form, then Sora says the lines from the opening, and then he is crystallized. He is crystallized, but what happens to him is that his soul and heart leave his physical form because his physical form disappeared with his heart and soul. It's not like his heart had left, and of course Kyrie, he just went limp and Kyrie fucking caught his body, and that was the ending of Kingdom Hearts 3. No, he completely disappeared. So his physical form disappeared as well. I believe that the Cristasis is the elimination of his physical form, reverting him into this soul form that Tetsuya Nomura has already confirmed could basically be counted as him being dead, because in order for him to get back to his friends, that would require a resurrection, the return to life, a revival. It will require a resurrection. So, what does this tell us as far as the events going forward? Well, with them being in their soul forms, I think Sora is going to go forward with learning about Chi. Chi. We see this in the trailer, and we even see this within the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer. And no, we see this within the Missing Link trailer and the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer, because the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer's logo, when it appears, incorporates an X that shines with the same type of light and shape as when the Master Xehanort summoned the X-Blade. When he summoned the X-Blade, we saw 4 points in the shape of an X come out, and then other points came out as well. But it started as an X when he summoned it. Then, in the Missing Link trailer, we see what appears to be those yellow threads that we see Sora create the drill and stuff from. We see those yellow threads actually circle around the logo for Missing Link. So, it seems like Sora will be, or going forward, Sora will be learning about Chi. And this also plays into the significance of why I believe his chest piece now has a light and dark side, to be representative of his perfect balance. His perfect balance via being the wielder of the Keyblade. But another thing too that may also happen as well, that comes with potentially Sora being in this soul form, which we pretty much already have confirmation for, because for him to have a form would mean that he would be dead. And for the game, the quote to be talking about the heart resides within the soul, is more than likely going to be the case that he's in his soul form. I mean, I think that that's pretty much not even arguable, because of the game itself already opening us up with the heart resides within the soul. It could be potentially that that quote actually is referring to Sora himself. The heart resides within the soul. This could be someone telling him this, or this could be him at the beginning of the game for the monologue that we get for each individual numeric entry. Another place that this may go when it comes to the story of Kingdom Hearts 4, with the heart resides within the soul, and of course all of this stuff that I've told you guys, is that potentially as well, what's going to happen is that Sora, the journey within Kingdom Hearts 4 may be about Sora learning that he has to put the pieces of his body back together. He may be going after the pieces of his true form, of his physical form. And by going after these pieces of his physical form, of course, this gives a conflict between him and the Master of Masters and the Foretellers, which is why they don't appear as much. Now, what does this also tell us is that finally, this gives us the missing piece to my theory. Listen, bro, listen. Because, yes, I am going to overstep and kind of conjugate some stuff, put some stuff together. I'm going to conjugate, and I'm definitely going to theorize, speculate, and kind of also fanfic, but it will make sense after I tell you. This puts the final piece into my theory on how Yozora can be Brain, yet Strelitzia and Sora. This thinking finally gives us understanding as to what's going on, what's different. We did see Strelitzia come to Unreality potentially when Lushu put her into the raft. When he put her in the raft, we know that, or potentially we know that that's how she got to Unreality. But when Sora came here, he was in his form too. And then this is the killing part. The reason why Yozora doesn't think of Sora to be the person that he sees, why he doesn't believe him to be Sora, could be because, unlike the characters that are in reality, the characters that still exist in reality, that come to Unreality via the rafts, Sora and Strelitzia retain their forms because they're souls. The other characters may be just taking over the bodies. It's like that Code Lyoko situation that I told you guys about. That's the final piece. When you put all of it together in this way, it starts to make sense how Yozora can be someone that's from reality, but have control over the body of Yozora, as the star says. But then Sora and Strelitzia themselves are in their original forms. So before, one of the broken pieces that anyone could have brought up and I would have had no answer for is that I didn't know how or why Brain or whoever's taking over Yozora wouldn't just be in their original forms. But now the final piece has finally been added. It's because they're in their soul forms that Sora and Strelitzia look like their original selves. However, the person that's using Yozora is here via some type of method that allows them to take control over the body. And I believe this to be exactly what we were told, that the heart is the only thing that travels through the raft. It is not the full form. The form has to be re-put back together, which it seems like the whole reason Kairi went to the Destiny Islands is because Aqua had met Sora and Riku, and thus this gave them a connection to where somebody was connected to Aqua who's connected to Kairi, and then of course the spell that Aqua put on Kairi that would bring her heart to a heart of light that could protect her in her time of need. So that's how all of those pieces go together, and that's the significance. This is like basically a second part to that other video I did. That's the significance of that quote from the beginning of the story. It's basically already hinting with Strelitzia herself that's saying to Sora, you can think of this world as an afterlife for us, that Sora is in his soul form, and at the same time too, it finally gives us the final piece to the theory that I've been making, that characters from reality are traversing to Unreality, potentially using the rafts, because we were told that Kairi could have wound up in Unreality using a raft. But the missing piece was, well, if characters are doing this, why does Sora still have his true form? And then when Strelitzia came out, I was like, damn, I think this probably blows a hole in that theory. But the more I thought about it, the more I watched the trailer and the more I put two and two together, it actually kind of is the final missing piece, because Sora and Strelitzia are in their soul forms. In other words, they don't need to be augmented. They fell into this unreality because they are in their soul forms. So thank you guys for tuning in into this video. This is being Boy Mazia. Don't forget to do a little A-class gaming and everything you do. Don't forget to keep it A-class. Whew, and I can finally fucking turn some air on in this motherfucker, man.